Is anybody else here checking the Bitcoin price constantly? Show of hands if you checked it at least 10 times today. Yeah? Yeah. Bitcoin, 100,000 USD. It is going to happen eventually. So if we could take the Tinkerbell strategy, if you could clap if you want Bitcoin to get up to $100,000, just give a little bit of applause if you believe it can get to 100,000 this weekend. Great. Now, as many of you know, Bitcoin has some really amazing features. There's only 21 million Bitcoin that'll ever be in existence. It's on a distributed ledger, and it records immutable transactions. Those are features of Bitcoin. And features are very different from solutions. The solutions of Bitcoin are things like you can send anyone money anywhere in the world as long as you have their wallet address. You don't need a trusted intermediary like a bank. And you can protect your wealth from the devaluation of inflation. Those are solutions of Bitcoin. And if we're going to onboard the next billion users on chain, we can't just tell them features. We have to talk about solutions. And that's what our conversation is about today. Joining me are Jonathan Inglis, the managing director of Protocol Theory, Robert McIntyre, the head of customer and operations for BTC Markets, Caroline Page of Virtually Human Studios, and Liam Thompson, a growth marketing manager at Coinbase. My name's Caelan Huntress. I'm a creative director with 25 years of storytelling experience, first as a theatrical performer and now as a marketing strategist. And we're going to talk today about how to go from features to solutions to make Web3 meaningful for real-world users. And the first topic that I want to talk about today is why we need to make this shift. When we talk about features, we want to be accurate and specific. So we focus on details. But we need to balance that with talking about features. Jonathan, what's one of the ways that we can balance features and solutions in our communications?
It's an interesting question, and by the way, thank you everybody for joining. I think the question how to balance technical features with solutions, I think it's the wrong way to frame the question, to be honest. Balance implies that they're almost two mutually exclusive things, right? That if we dial up the technical features of our product and we communicate that more heavily, that somehow diminishes how we should be sort of communicating that through how we're solving real world problems. The two things that they're not mutually exclusive. And so when you look at, for example, so the key idea here anyway is that consumers, and this is something we all need to, I think, understand and integrate much more effectively into how we're designing and building Web3 products. Consumers do not ultimately buy technical features and solutions. They buy, technical features, they buy solutions to their problems, right? And so if you look at, for example, take any Apple iPhone advertisement, right? They spend very little time talking about the technical features of that phone. Maybe to some extent they do, but it tends to be very minimal. What they tend to do is instead highlight how this phone is enhancing connectivity and how it's used in their day-to-day lives, how it's ultimately enriching and enhancing their lives and solving their pain points and their problems as consumers. I think that's what we need to do a better job collectively as an industry.
Yeah, like how the iPod is 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Correct, exactly right, yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I think what we do in Web3 a lot of the time is we sort of start with the tech first and try to retrofit that to consumer needs. And I think that's where we often go wrong. It really should be the other way around, right? It should be identifying the consumer need and building the tech to that.
I'll just add to that. Apologies. Afternoon, everyone. Roger McIntyre from BTC Markets. I think one of the key things that we find at BTC Markets, and we do a lot of customer research as well on this, is one of the challenges is just the complexity and the technical specificity of this industry. Okay, I think we've all been here today And we're hearing things like tokenization, decentralization, zero-proof knowledges, oracles. If you said that to a normal person in the street, they'd either just look at you and walk away, or they'd call an ambulance and say, someone's having a stroke in front of me, all right? It's incredibly challenging. I mean, a lot of us in this industry, we talk about this every day, all right? So we're used to it, we're familiar with it. But for the customer in the street, the average retail customer who's not crypto native, and that's the vast majority of Australians still, what we talk about is incredibly confusing. So what we find, we're trying to design products at BTC Markets, and with the research we're doing with Jonathan's team as well, is to try and bridge that gap, okay? How are we trying to solve the customer's needs? What do they need us to do for them, okay? It's only once you start to bridge that gap and then explain it in an easy, intuitive, relatable way, we start to bridge this gap we've got with the customer or the standard person in the street about what the benefits of blockchain, Web3, crypto actually bring to their lives. But unless we cross that, we're always going to be on the outer. So it's a key goal for us and something we can all work towards.
So Caroline, in the work you do at Virtually Human Studios, how do you focus your communications on the solutions instead of just the features?
Yeah, so Virtually Human Studio is a Web3 entertainment studio. Our flagship game is a game called Zrun, which is a digital horse racing game. And notice that I say digital horse racing game because that is exactly how I would explain it to people or to customers who really don't understand what Web3 or blockchain or NFTs are. Because they are NFTs, people can own them, that's built on the blockchain. The way that we look at, I guess, selling that forward is really involving the community and not focusing, as Jonathan just mentioned, on the technicalities of that. As Rob just said, we're in this little echo chamber. Most people don't know what Web3 is, let alone know, when Bitcoin's going up, we're all like, woo, yeah. But you go to your coffee shop and say that to the guy behind the counter or someone there, they won't know what you're talking about. There won't be any excitement. So in terms of our community, we have a community of about 80,000 people. The reason we have that community is because they're either interested in winning money, so there's prize pools that they can win. There's horses that they can own, so ownership is a big part of the sort of what we're promoting. And then they also have the community where they have input. They can watch us building this game. Like we've been in beta now for about 6 years. So in the Web3 way, they're actually invested. We're getting feedback from them. They're watching us, build, make mistakes, make it better, and continue on that journey. And it's all about thinking, what is the benefit of your product? What is the benefit of to those people? What is the value add? Because if there's no value add and there's no use case, people aren't interested. The other thing we do have is we have partnerships with quite a few well-known brands like Budweiser, Atari, NASCAR. We also partnered with the Victorian Racing Club for Melbourne Cup. And again, that brings familiarity to people who are like, oh, I know Budweiser. Budweiser's the king of beers and I appreciate them. And if they're partnering, then that's a familiarity that brings me and interests me in joining.
One thing I'll just add, sorry, really quickly, that Zrun do really well, and Caroline mentioned it there, is they partner with traditional Web2 companies. And the great thing about partnering with those companies is they bring you back to reality, okay? They go, what problem are we solving together? And we'll tell you how to explain it to our customer base. So partnering with those companies is a fantastic way to engage their customer base, who they know better than anybody else. They help you explain it in a way that's relatable, that helps you sell the product, get the product across to the customer. So it's a great amalgamation if you can bring them on board.
Yeah, I might just add to the back of what you've just said there, Roger. It's also where people are getting this information from. So, early days crypto, it might have been a very heavy docs online. Now it might be a Twitter thread. It maybe was, rocking up to a meeting like this 10 years ago where it was very technical, and now we can actually open it up and have these conversations a way more relatable way. The main point I sort of wanted to raise is sort of the intern or the rise of the intern on social media. So a lot of the crypto exchanges or platforms have really started toying and playing with this relatable, maybe it's a bit more for the Zoomers in the room, but it doesn't have to be so overwhelming and jargony and technical and ZK roll-ups and that. It's, here's a really cool bite-sized bit by bit. Maybe it's a TikTok or a YouTube video, but this is how we can actually start having conversations at a way more relatable level than, you know, the kind of overwhelming nature of that some of these conversations can get into.
Yeah, and knowing how to frame those conversations is best done by discovering what the user needs. I appreciate what you said, Caroline, about having so much feedback from the users. And Web3 lacks a lot of robust consumer research that we have in Web 2. Web 2 has been doing consumer research for a really long time, and without that body of evidence in consumer research in Web 3, how do we discover what the pain points are? Roger, what do you think?
I think the point's right, is correct in terms of the challenge of Web3 is that it's so new, okay? 10, 15 years, depending on when you want to draw the line, the body is such a small body of evidence or body of data to actually work off. Add to that, we're still only penetrating maybe 20, 25% of the population, okay? So small amount of time frame, small data set, okay? So the challenge is, how do you engage, how do you understand, how do you actually get beyond that as well? Now I'm going to plug protocol theory here, Jonathan, who we've been doing a lot of work with recently, and it's all been trying to actually bridge that gap, okay? What is it about Web3? What is the how, and how do we actually solve the problem for the customer? Who is the customer? Okay, everyone talks about historically the crypto bro. We know that that archetype is disappearing. Okay, more and more people are coming in. Women in particular are joining crypto or blockchain or Web3. Older people, 45 plus, are coming on board. They're a bit more conservative, a bit more hesitant. Okay, but their interest, they're engaging. What are they after? What problems are we trying to solve? So what I'd say, groups like Protocol Theory, and there are others doing it as well, but we're finally starting to actually put some real dollars, real time, real assets towards trying to understand how do we get in front of the customer with the right product in the right channel at the right time. And we're starting to make a big difference now in terms of the products we build, how we engage the customer, which platforms we engage them with, and what are they after as well. Okay, I think historically we've probably been shooting in the dark a bit, but I think the body of evidence now is starting to really build up and starting to become quite a critical mass.
Yeah, Jonathan, how does protocol theory create that body of evidence of consumer research?
Ooh, without getting too technical, I mean, there's a variety of methodologies that we use, right? So we do consumer research, right? So we go out and we actually talk to users, not just users, existing users, but we talk to the market, non-users, maybe the future wave of crypto consumers and adopters. And depending on the questions that we're asking or the questions that the company that we're working for are asking, we'll use a variety of different methodologies, broadly what we call quantitative or qualitative methodologies. Again, try not to get too technical. Yeah, a variety of methods. And ultimately what we're trying to do is really get underneath the surface of why people are making the decisions that they do within the context of Web3. What's driving them to want to actually adopt and use in the first place? What are the barriers to them adopting and using? And often when we're doing this, we can't rely on what we call direct questioning, right? So if many of you have probably written a survey or done a survey at some point in your career perhaps, and often the questions that we ask are very direct. Would you do this, or how would you do this? When it comes to identifying unmet consumer needs or trying to understand what's going on at a more subconscious level and how do we sort of leverage that to get them to want to try our product or our brand, we often cannot rely on these direct questions. We have to rely on what are called implicit techniques, right? So there's a whole sort of body of techniques that we use around that as well. So try not to get too technical, but there's a bunch of different sort of ways that we do this, but in a very evidence-based, sort of rigorous, almost scientific way.
So once we have that consumer research, what's going to be different in Web3?
Is that for me as well?
Sure.
Say it again. So
once we have robust consumer research, we have a body of evidence. What will be different in Web3?
What we hope is that we'll have a set of products and services and experiences that mimic the experience essentially of Web 2, right? But still fundamentally underpinned with Web 3 technology. I think that's the only way that we're going to, achieve what we're ultimately all here trying to achieve, is onboarding the next billion users, onboarding the world on chain, right? Currently, the user experiences up until now, these products have been adopted by innovators and early adopters, right? And so these people are more willing to take risks on new products, but that's not going to work for the next wave of early majority, late majority, and the laggards. So what we hope is that through collecting this body of evidence, through working with companies like BTC Markets, to helping them understand the audience, the market, we can ultimately develop better products, better user experiences, get more people on board, and grow this awesome industry that we have.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's really looking at, obviously, once we have all that data, once we really understand who our audience is, depending on what clientele you're looking for, we have to actually look at what is the use case for Web3. What is that one thing that's dragging people across from Web2 to Web3? Because at the moment, there's no sort of transition for the mainstream audiences to sort of think, oh, that's a benefit for me, that's something I need to jump across to and I need to get into. So when you have that data, you can create campaigns and articulate everything purposefully, and you can show them very clearly what the benefit is, not just because you're talking about it and just messaging, it's because you're actually understanding what that benefit is. You can see it in the data and you can use that moving forward. And I think it's really critical when you look at a lot of the different industries that are invested now in this sort of in this space, to really think about that use case and try to understand what that looks like.
I just wanted to add, when we're talking about sort of pain points within crypto, I'm sure most people in this room have set up a wallet at some point, and you've got your 12 or your 24 word seed phrase, and okay, do I screenshot this? Am I going to get hacked? Do I write it down, or did I write the right word down? Am I ever going to try and get back into this wallet again? So that onboarding experience, that has been a pain point since day dot. Something at Coinbase that we've been working on is the smart wallets. So using your Face ID, your biometrics on your phone, locally stored in your phone. Banks are starting to do this. PayPal, I literally just set up my passphrase the other day. But using your Face ID, Touch ID, bang, abstract it away. You don't need to worry about your seed phrase because your seed phrase is your biometric. We actually sponsored the Melbourne Marathon a couple of months ago, and everyone that finished the marathon, the half marathon, or the 10K got a digital medal, and it was a one-click onboarding experience. We had nearly 2,000 people who had never touched the blockchain, never touched crypto before, come on chain and collect a digital medal with their split times on it, all on chain in one click from an email. So that's a cool way of thinking about what a pain point might be and how we can sort of abstract that away a bit. I'm sure anyone that's played around on Ethereum knows ENS domains, or 0xD57, am I sending it to the right address? You check it 14 times before you click send and you're still freaking out. So trying to come up with some more human ways, like a Venmo, like a Cash App, that we could think about, okay, I'm definitely going to make sure this money gets to Roger and not some random address somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's actually something we had to work with for Zedrun, is looking at how can we get people onboarded with fiat, how can they onboard with credit cards, can they do this, because that is a massive barrier to entry. So we could find that we would attract people, through the funnel to the door of Zedrun, but not necessarily getting them that next step, because, having to go through all of that sort of setting up seed phrase, because we are using Ethereum and, on Polygon, and they need the wallet, and it just became quite complex. Whereas once they're in and they're playing, and then you can sort of guide them towards setting up their wallet and what they need to do. But it's definitely one of those sort of pain points and everyday sort of, I guess, use cases that's very easy to understand a barrier there.
Great examples. Yeah, and getting the next billion users on chain, we need to talk to them differently than we talk to the people in this room. Because everybody here, we're all early. We're all curious, technologically competent people. And normies are not necessarily both curious and technologically competent. And so we need to talk to them differently. And so I'm wondering, do we have any examples from Web 2 of companies that have used consumer research to onboard people well? Caroline, are there any great examples you can think of?
The one I was thinking of, which is sort of relates again back into gaming, because that's obviously where I'm at, but looking at Roblox, and if you look at that as a gaming company, like, it is huge. And the reason that it's so big is because they really understand who their market is. They've gone after specifically, the younger sort of generation, and Gen Z, and then gone also into Gen X by having different sandbox arenas that appeal to different people. They've made it easy for people to access. They've partnered with really big brands like Ralph Lauren, even changed their horse icon to a llama specifically for the game in Roblox, which is incredible because it shows how keen the brands are as well to access the audiences and to really understand how they can gain access to that next generation. And they're huge. Like they, I think, are making over like 800 million a month. Like it's insane the amount of sort of revenue that they are gaining. And that's something to really look at and understand. And I think also in terms of that, just in terms of Web3, games is a way that is talked about quite often to bring people on board because it is something that's familiar to a lot of people in the mainstream, and so a lot of brands or bigger brands are keen to sort of dip their toe into that area because they feel like it's a way for them to connect with those audiences as well. So
I might just sort of add, and then I'll pass it over, but previous to Coinbase, I was over at Stables. Shout out Stables to anyone from their team that's here today. But that was a team that had built the mobile Zip sort of buy now, pay later app, and working alongside a lot of those designers and product designers who were really putting that customer centricity first. Just everything from the sign up flow. I mean, I'm sure there's experiences in this room of exchanges where you're trying to onboard and you've got a KYC and do this and do that. Loads of elements to it, but you can still streamline these experiences. So it's also just being mindful of between Web 2 and Web 3, there are still very Web 2-esque or just straight up Web 2 components that we still do have within the Web 3 space. And if you're out there building or doing something or trying to work from a marketing perspective, is how can we actually just make this as streamlined as possible, bearing in mind who the actual end user is going to be. And we're starting to onboard people who don't understand the jargon. They haven't been here for the last 5, 10 plus years. I'm sure there's people in this room, this might be your first crypto convention. And so we've got to bear in mind that it's the whole wide spectrum of people that are onboarding and making that as easy as possible.
So do we need to make Web3 invisible and pretend that it's Web 2 interfaces to bring the next billion users on chain?
I don't think you need to make it invisible. I mean, there's a point of differentiation there that's important. But I think, to be fair, the more we do make it invisible, the better it'll be. The engagement is easier. I mean, if you look at, to use the payments example, so every time you do a credit card purchase, use your phone, okay? There's about 35 different touch points in what you're doing right there, from the actual hardware, the software, the merchant, the acquirer, the rails, everything else like that in between, okay? But you know none of that. Or you might do, but most people don't, right? All I know is I put my phone on, it pays, it gets me to solves my problem, which is I want to purchase that, okay? The complexity is enormous behind any card transaction, but it's all hidden, and it should be, because it's not important to the end user, which is, I need to buy X. And it's the same for us, okay? We have to decomplicate this. We have to actually put it down, hide it away. Customers don't care really how it works, as long as it's safe, the money's secure, and they're working with a trusted partner. That's all they really want, and you're solving the problem for them, okay? You do those things, you're 90% of the way to getting more customers on board, right? If you can make the most amazing product in the world, but if it doesn't solve a problem easily for a customer, you're not going to have too many customers, because they'll find something else.
So how do we measure success? If we think of the triple Venn of the different audiences we need to talk to, there's the developers who are focused on the utility. There's the consumers who are focused on, we're focused on the adoption. We want to see how many consumers we can get on. There's the community who's focused on ease of use. Like, what's the right metric that we should be using to measure success? What do you think, Liam?
Yeah, I mean, there's two elements to this. So we can obviously talk to the end of the day about adoption and so on, but I think the big thing is also retention, right? Who's actually hanging around to use this stuff? So when there's a new protocol launch or a new blockchain or a new app, everyone's going, wow, this thing just blew up and got 100,000 people to use it in 2 days. And then it's, okay, check it out on chain. And this is the cool thing, is it's transparent. You can go and see who's using it, and it's fizzled out into oblivion and no one's using it anymore. So I think, the retention element is massive. And I just wrote down 2 examples before this, but, off the back of the US election, Polymarket was in the headlines to the extent to which, you know, if you were actually watching the results through Polymarket, you were actually ahead of a lot of the news networks by, in some cases, multiple hours. And that's people putting real money on the line, but again, talking about abstracting things away, USDC on Polygon, but you can top it up with your credit card. Or if you've got the USDC and you get what that is, sure, fire that away as well. So there's an example of, you know, I think one of these apps protocols where they've done a really good job of kind of going, hey, look, prediction market, kind of a bit more traditional, but it doesn't feel crypto-y. The other one I had written down is for anyone who's onto the Solana ecosystem here is Pump Fund, right? And, you know, absolute meme coin mania on that, but they've really leaned in to the fact that they are crypto. And if you look at the stats on that, every single day, 40,000 meme coins being launched, whether you're in that boat or not, but, you know, it's being adopted and it's not going away, at least at the moment. But that's not even retention, that's just continual week on week, day on day, you know, all-time highs there from adoption. So just a couple there from, yeah, my end.
If you want to look at the Polymarket prediction for the US election just gone by the way, it is unbelievably accurate. From 1 week before the election to the final outcomes, it nailed, it's incredible. It got it almost across the board. So definitely worth a look at. I think in terms of just what I will say too, we talk about retention, we look at stuff like customer churn, we've got 1,000 stats we look at. I think for the industry as a whole, you mentioned what's beyond adoption. I think for me the key is still adoption. All right? Adoption is the number 1, 2 and 3 thing for the success of the industry. And one of the things we know, so we've done a couple of very big studies of Jonathan, and about a year ago we did our first one, and one of the things we looked at is crypto rejectors and non-rejectors. Okay, so people who are interested in crypto and people who said they had no interest whatsoever, they'll never touch crypto. And what was amazing is that over the course of about 12 months, how much the crypto rejectors dropped. Okay, so the number of people, for me that was a huge success. Still very hard to engage, they're very cautious, very conservative, but that for me is a measure of success of the industry, that all of a sudden people who said they'd never touch crypto and they were going, I might consider it. Because at the end of the day, this whole industry only really works once everyone starts to adopt it, once it becomes part of the plumbing of how we operate, how we engage, how we go through our daily lives. If we always sit on the outer, it's going to be very hard. We've got to get into actually just being part of how people go through their daily lives and just helping them get to their end goal.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I agree with that in terms of adoption. There's only about 516, I think it's like 1,000 people that actually use crypto around the world. So it's very small, you know, the amount of people that you're actually, if you're setting up as an innovator, and I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs as well, and their business, and you're looking at where you're going and you want to be successful and have, you know, longevity and be sustainable, you have to sort of look at adoption, and you have to look at education, and you have to look at, again, that benefit, because it's really that sort of building trust and getting people to understand the benefits of working in this space, because it really is important, I think, in terms of information, in terms of decentralization, in terms of all of those sort of aspects, just getting people to look at it differently and to trust in what we're doing, and to sort of put behind all the news that, you know, has come up around all the sort of recent scams and things like that, and to ride the wave with the new, like, Bitcoin and the market kind of pumping up, and just look at the opportunity instead of facing the fear.
I'll add a little bit of nuance to this, I think, Caelan. So adoption is a really interesting one. We do quite a lot of research globally in terms of adoption and what's driving adoption. When you really look into it, it's an interesting one, because there's no universal sort of definition for what adoption actually is, right? And it actually gets quite, again, interesting the more you look into this. So is adoption, when we talk about adoption, is that somebody buying Bitcoin on a centralized exchange and just letting it sit there, and they're not actually engaging in the ecosystem at all? They're just, you know, they might have some Bitcoin somewhere stored on a centralized exchange. Or is adoption, you know, DeFi involvement and getting involved in more the Web3 ecosystem? And the more you unpack it, there's, yeah, adoption is a spectrum, right? And so for me, it's not enough to just say adoption is kind of the end goal. I think it's very important, and it's clearly a leading indicator of success. But there's more to it than that. And for me, it would be some measure of engagement I think is what we want from the industry, right? So it's not enough to have adoption. There's got to be some degree of sustainable engagement, which would probably be reflected in things like on-chain metrics and on-chain activity and that sort of thing. But in addition, we also want to see Web3 companies ultimately start to eat into the market share of traditional Web2 companies, right? When we start to see that, I think that's an important measure of success for our industry at least.
Yeah, it's a great point, and that's why I appreciate what Liam said so much about retention being an important metric. And as we're able to measure these things over time, we're going to have more robust consumer research. And without that research, we're not going to have very good adoption because people are going to be building and they won't necessarily be building things for solutions. And so when people want to make sure they're building the right thing, where do they get their consumer research? How should they figure out what to measure, Jonathan?
Oh, another big question, Caelan. Look, they should come to us. No, I'm just kidding. Look, ultimately, like, they need to go to the users, right? You need to talk to the market, you need to talk to customers, you need to talk to the people that you want to be buying using your product or service. But again, important distinction here. Who you talk to is really, really important. What we find is that a lot of companies that do internal consumer research, they'll go out and you know, what we call convenience sampling. They'll go out and they'll talk to their users, their existing users. That's great for certain end goals. So for example, if you want to drive retention on your platform, talk to your users, right? They're ultimately the ones that are actually using it in the first place. But if you're trying to uncover new opportunities in the market, if you're trying to understand how to grow your market share, how to, you know, the next wave of users on your platform, what do they look like and what do they want? What's going to drive them to your platform? You're not going to get those insights from talking to your existing customers, because the next wave of users on your platform or product or service might look very different to those that are currently using it, right? So how you define who you talk to and then how you go about doing that in an objective, evidence-based way is really important. That's kind of what we do. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but...
Yeah, that's great. So now I'm curious, what would be the most impactful type of research to have? Roger, if you could wave a magic wand and get any type of research about your customers, what would you want to have?
Oh, what do I want? Jesus. You didn't prep me for this question, mate. How do we help you? Like, what are you trying to achieve? So I work for a crypto exchange. What are you trying to do? Is it just trying to make money? Are you trying to actually save for something? Are you just trying to actually get volatility? Why are you with us? What is the key? What problem are we solving for you? And am I solving it really well? Okay, at the end of the day, it comes down to one of the things I find is interesting is that Web3, I come from KPMG into NAB, into crypto, so a very traditional CV, and all of a sudden I'm in Web3. And one of the things I found jarring when I came across to Web3 was, I guess, the antagonism towards Web2. And what I also noticed is that we were building products that were technically beautiful, okay, from an engineering dream, but from a customer usage perspective, quite often garbage, okay? Where Web3 can really learn from things like Web2 is through such things as human-centered design, okay? That is where you put the customer at the center of your product design. You innovate, you engage, you understand what problem am I solving, how am I getting there? You iterate with them as you go through the product development cycle. And what we've seen over the last few years is the best Web3 companies have brought that on board. I know Coinbase do, I know Zrun do, I know we're starting to do it. We've been doing it for the last year and a half now, and it's making a fundamental change in how our customers are engaging with us. So at the end of the day, one of the best things we can ever get from our customers is how can we help you solve your problem, and then we iterate that into our new product designs.
If I can maybe jump in as well, kind of almost pre-research, and I think this is a very cool thing that's maybe yet to be super tapped into in crypto, but we can, rather than in Web 2, thinking about screeners, what's your age, what's your demographic, what are your goals in life? A crypto wallet, by its very nature, you can actually drill into that quite well. So it might not tell you specifically what someone's trying to do, but you can start actually getting quite qualified, leads from wallets. And I know there's some marketing teams that are really looking into on-chain analytics to try and drive, whether it's targeted ads or campaigns to. But if I find a wallet on chain that's holding this token and that token, or this NFT, traditionally people have just done airdrops and sort of thought, okay, now they're going to go and adopt my platform and start using it. But right from the get-go is you can actually look at on-chain data, you can look at on-chain wallets, and actually get a fairly qualified user right off the bat, and then start thinking about, okay, what is it that I actually really want to drill down into from this user base? And the same thing goes when it comes to a crypto exchange. I can actually see what types of tokens someone might be holding and base an entire sort of almost campaign around that cohort or that specific user.
And that's a fascinating aspect of Web3 is that we can get such granular information about our users through the on-chain activity. But I want to circle back to using consumer research to create a solution. And Caroline, you mentioned that you do a lot of, you've used a lot of consumer research in the past to improve your betas. Can you give us an example of anything that you've done with a game where you've improved it based on user feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about, at the moment, we're in a sort of alpha phase, a testing phase of building the new or the next iteration of Zedrun and what that looks like. And so, we've gone out to community, we get them, on a wait list, they're with us, and then they're coming and they're testing the game for us. So we're actually getting information from them on what they like to do, how they like to play, what kind of things are working for them, what aren't working for them. We made sure the demographic is quite broad. And then from the alpha testing, we go to beta testing, which is more broad. So it's not just our community. It will be Web3 communities who come in and they can then test, and potentially some media and whoever else, so that you're getting a really broad cross-section, and internationally as well. So we have the majority of our users are in North America, then Australia, and then a few sort of dotted around in Asia and Europe. And so we're making sure that not just focused on, one particular cohort. The majority of our users are men between 25 and 55. And so we want to look at women and want to understand, what are they playing? What sort of things do they like to do? What's going to engage them? What's going to make them stay, as you said, and play? And, aside from, winning money, which everybody loves in this game, what is it about what we're doing that we can improve on, and how can we make this better and more engaging to everybody? And you're building that sort of new protocol on the blockchain. And I think it's a really exciting thing to understand, and also to bring people in who aren't necessarily, already crypto natives. So looking at people who aren't familiar with crypto and getting them to have a look at it and understand. And we get a lot of data that we then bring back into the company, and we then, generate and sort of fix and mend the game from there. So, yeah.
I'll give you a quick example as well from an exchange, and how it's so important just to actually understand your customer, but also how the customer in Web3 is different. So I come from a banking background, and one of the key metrics you use from a customer metric is churn rate, customer churn, how many customers you're losing off platform, etc., or unsubscribes, whatever it might be. And looking at and using BTC Markets as an example, we had quite a high churn rate there for a little while. And we were trying to actually understand what's going on. Churn was basically for us when customers would take their assets off platform. It's like, this is disappointing. Like, thought we were doing okay. So we looked into it. We spoke to the customers. It's like, why did you leave us? Exit interviews, etc. And they go, well, we haven't left you. We just take our assets off platform, okay? Because I trust you, but I trust me more, okay? So, and when the market kicked again, they came back. So while this looked like a dormant account to us, a lost customer, really they're actually just waiting for the next market move for the particular asset they're trading. So what we took out from that was basically we made it much easier for them to actually reload their assets on platform. We started talking to them about how we keep their funds secure in Australia under our own custody, and then also how we actually make sure if they do want to take it off platform, who are the best partners for them to go with. So all of a sudden we start to understand the customer much better, and it's unique. You bank with NAB or anyone else, you can't take your entire life savings and put it on a USB, okay? You can do that with crypto. You can take it off to an off-chain, off-platform ledger. So it's a different setup. So you always have a different mindset about how you engage with customers, how they use your platform, and how they're using their crypto as well.
It's a fascinating example, Roger, of how to focus on the solution for the customer instead of just the features. And now I'd like to give some advice to everybody in the audience. If we were going to help, because I know a lot of you are builders, you're working on your own projects. If the builders in this audience were to shift from talking about features to talking about solutions, what's one piece of advice you would give them? This might be a top of the line, the best way you could do it, might be middle of the road, it might be the bare minimum you should do. But Jonathan, what's a piece of advice that you'll give them?
Honestly, just talk to them. Talk to your users, talk to the market, understand what is it that they want, what pain point are they trying to solve with your product or service, and then how do you position, market, message your product around that pain point?
Make it simple. One of the things I love about blockchain, Web3, crypto, is I get to be surrounded by some of the smartest people I've ever met, and I've been fortunate to meet quite a lot of smart people in my time. We are solving problems, building a new universe, doing things on the edge, etc. But it's incredibly confusing to the normal person, okay? We've said before, we've got to close that gap. We've got to make it simple. That's not a critique of the normal person. They got other stuff in their day, all right? They got other problems, other issues. How are we solving their problems, and how do we communicate to them to make it as easy, as intuitive as possible, so they don't have to think about it, they just get it done. We do that, again, we're all a long way along getting that adoption curve where we need to be, where we're also on the mass market.
Yeah, I think as well as that, like, do your own research. Make sure that you're, operating on correct data, that everything you're using is accurate, that, there's a lot of data out there that isn't necessarily 100% accurate, and so you need to just make sure that in looking at your community and understanding what this benefit is of your product or whatever you're promoting, that you are accurately doing so, and that you're researching your community and really lean into whatever that community is, who they are, what they look like, and what they actually want. Don't fall into the trap of just because it's new and it's Web3 and whatever else, just making something for the sake of it, which I think there is a bit of drift in Web3 with that, where people just creating all sorts of functionality left, right, and center. But yeah, just really, do your research and understand what it is that your users want.
Yeah, probably similar thematic, but get your hands dirty. Jump into the trenches, get on Twitter, get onto these platforms where people are actually going to come to you with this information. They're going to tell you what's wrong, what they're looking for. I think I've had that many surveys from different companies or platforms. Get a $50 voucher to give us your insights, your feedback. Jump on Twitter for any decent platform, or there'll be 20 different tweets from people. Hey, this doesn't work. I was having trouble there. Some of the best founders that I've actually worked with are doing customer support themselves, because they're no higher than that. They are just jumping in and going, how can I help? And so I think there's a lot of really good stories, especially from the Web3 crypto world, where people actually will get their hands dirty, will jump in and listen to the end user, because they're going to be forthcoming with that information and let you know what it is that they're struggling with.
One story I will say, I don't love the banks like most people think in Web3 crypto, but one of the things I do think that NAB, my old bank, did do very well is that once a year what they do is make the senior executives go sit on the phones. Okay, for one day a year they'd have to sit on the phones and actually talk to the customer. Okay, usually about 47 levels removed from the customer. For one day a year, had to sit there at the coalface, talk to the customer, hear their problems, understand them, listen to them, and then after that they actually had to list down all the problems they'd heard and how they're going to solve them, and then actually close them out like 2 or 3 weeks later. Okay, that I thought was a great thing they did in a large company. They didn't have to do it, but it's all about getting the customer to the forefront of the conversation, because if you forget the customer, you forget what you're doing.
That's great advice. So to recap this, how to make Web3 meaningful for real world users: talk to your customers, keep it simple, do your own research, and
get into the trenches, get your hands dirty.
And get your hands dirty. Now, if you don't want to get your hands dirty, you can go by Protocol Theory's booth, and they can handle the market research for you. But getting some unique market research about your customer is going to be really helpful. Every time you ship a new feature and you list that bullet point on your website, see if you can pair it with a solution that actually makes a difference in your customer. So thanks all for taking part in this conversation today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.